Yes, I think I will be the cold spray in this warm room, because I will talk a little about privacy and how to deal with it in this big data times. My background is that I have been working for 30 years in parliamentary technology assessment, meaning that I've been advising policymakers about new technology, grand societal challenges, as they are called now, when technology plays a role. I've been involved in the Danish discussion about privacy, data protection for many, many years. But also I'm a biologist by training, and now the Danish Board of Technology is taking part in the Human Brain Project, which is kind of overlapping with the issue here, I think. There we're taking care of stakeholder engagement and citizen participation in order to get messages from society to the Human Brain Project. I will come back to that later. I think it's obvious that big data gives a lot of opportunities for increasing our health services, making them better, making them more effective, focusing on the right things. There's no doubt about that. But I also think that it's important to say that all these opportunities can be lost very swiftly if the license to operate suddenly disappears. And there's a true risk for that. I mean, in Britain, how many persons in the royal family should suddenly be on the front page because it appears that they had mental health problems that shouldn't have gone into the public? And that could have profound effect on funding of this kind of research, I guess. So that's just a case, a crisis. But in the less crisis-like manner, I think it's also good to think of privacy as something that will slowly deteriorate the trust in society if we do not take care of it. And I think that's actually more serious. We have to remember that if you looked at the first slide that Carsten showed up here, where you looked at all the registers, at these times, these are the registers we have. But we're also installing smart cities, where we register people's movement in transportation, we register their waste, their everything. Pervasive computing, pervasive registering is everywhere. We are registered everywhere, all of the time, and there will only be more of it in the future. Because we are developing so many smart solutions in our society that will basically come with the same kind of argument that this group comes with. If we get access to these data, if we get more data, then we can make better services. And that counts for all parts of society. So when you're thinking of this area, mental health, and you're thinking of big data here, and you think of the loss of trust that could come up from that in society, then you have to couple it to the registration that goes on in all other areas, because they will be coupled at some point. At some point there will be someone saying, what about if we could connect people's movement in transportation with some health problem, or if we could measure on their sewage and connect that to something that will happen. So this is a really dominant trend, that we will gather more and more data and we will use it for more and more. And that doesn't make the privacy problem smaller. There's one idea about privacy which I often hear when I make these kind of speech, is that what is the problem? We have the single person who wants privacy, and then we have the collective who can get a lot of outcome out of not giving that privacy. So I think it's a wrong way of looking at it. First of all, we're not talking about acute situations. In any acute situation in healthcare, drop any privacy. There's no privacy. And when we ask citizens about how they think about privacy in healthcare and security, they say, in any acute situation, drop it. We're not talking about the acute situation. We're talking about being used as data objects. And so, first of all, separate those two things. Privacy is not a problem in acute situations. No one wants it to be. If we look at it as data objects, then we're beginning to talk about fundamental rights. Privacy is a fundamental right. We're talking about things that could happen in society if we do not respect privacy, like society being more and more conform, because if you're not conform, then you'll stick out and you'll be found in different situations, which can mean something for your insurance drawing, for your chance of getting an employment, for your chance of becoming politician, or whatever. So basically, if you want to avoid that when we pick up so much data, be conform. Don't stick out. We don't want that. We want an innovative society where people stick out, where they have the courage to become politicians, where they have the courage to do something original. We don't want them to be conform. So trust with regard to this can cost society, loss of trust with regard to this can cost a lot of solutions, innovative power, and money in society. This is often forgotten. Another thing which is often forgotten is how is it we act if we are surveilled all of the time, or our data can make an ex-ante surveillance of us. We begin to make pseudo what do we call it? Pseudo behavior. We begin to act as a person instead of being a person. That's part of the conformity scheme. You could see that in the Eastern Bloc, which were heavily surveilled. People began to act alive instead of live alive. And we don't want that. Okay, the last thing I would say, this is more general for data protection and definitely not in this area more than everybody else. But the kind of crime that is increasing the most in society now is ICT-based crime. And these guys who are making this ICT-based crime, they're using exactly the data we're talking about. They're using it to make blackmail, to steal identities, many different kinds of very innovative ways of earning money. And so that's another view on this. We don't want this kind of crime to increase, and therefore everybody who works with big data should basically live up to data protection rules. Is it feasible? Yes, it is. It is possible to make big data systems that totally respect any form of privacy. It's even possible to make them in ways so that it's faster to use, easier to use than many of the systems you already know. It's possible to make them in ways so that you can get access to any kind of data. They can be interconnected totally. But the difference in a very good big data management which protects data protection is that all the technology involved in it lives up to the most recent standards, that things are separated on different servers. For example, that if you have to break into several servers, that makes each server more vulnerable, but the whole system, the whole picture view through big data is more difficult to get, or through intrusion is more difficult to get. So more servers, encrypted data, distributed computing in the way that you, for example, take aggregated data from a specific searcher and provide that to the researcher instead of giving personal data to the single person. All these things are possible, and there are systems to do it out there. And then I come back to the Human Brain Project. When this project was started, I was the naughty guy on row one who put a question to the leader and said, "Have you thought about privacy in this project?" And that was silence. They did not think of it. And then we began to work with it. We began to look at different ways of keeping privacy. And my feeling is that the solutions that have come up, when they are made, will make the big data, huge big data project, Human Brain Project, I mean, state of the art with research, with privacy protection. State of the art. And this is really a big data project. We're talking about gathering clinical brain data from hospitals all over the world, comparing them to different computer models of the brain, or parts of the brain, functions in the brain actually, And what happens there is that the data are kept at the hospitals. They are delivered as aggregated data on grounds of query to the servers in the hospitals. And the users do not get access to data, they get access to making analysis on the data. So there's no way of taking it out and working with them in a spreadsheet. But you can work with them through the platform in the Human Brain Project. So it is actually possible to do that on a huge big data project like the Human Brain Project. I think I have 1 minute or something? Yeah. One thing that will be a challenge, and is a challenge also in the Human Brain Project, is the diversity of consent systems that data have been given in. What we are talking about in the Human Brain Project is that we might be able to stamp data with the consent that they have been given under. So it basically means that in the hospital, a certain set of clinical data on each piece of data, part of your query to the server in the hospital, you say, and I only want data that lives up to this and this consent quality. And then you only get that. And when the data comes back, it's stamped with that consent system that you have. And then if you begin to make another analysis on the data, then the system will say, no, you cannot do that. Part of this data has been delivered under another consent code. So you will have to make a new query. So it is possible to deal with, but it is a challenge. And it means that hospitals making these, and all actors making these data, should actually be very much aware of attaching the consent system to the data, because this is a problem, and it will not be a smaller problem in the future. It will not. It will be a bigger problem in the future, because we have to, if we're forecasting a little on what will happen in regulation in this area, it will not be weaker in the future, it will be stronger. There will be more regulation. We had the directive before, now we're getting a regulation. We won't get, the next regulation will not be weaker. So if we look ahead, then probably there will be a very big demand for strong consent management. Let me say, as a last sentence, that in general, I think that the threat for privacy and human rights in this area is not the big brother society. In the end it is. If we are overtaken by some foreign, in a future war, and then, of course, that's a scenario we could think of. The big problem is not Big Brother, the big problem is Big Mother. The big problem is that we say, oh yeah, we are doing good for the world, so we can ignore privacy. And it is such a big problem that there are no one who wants to make big data analysis in this world, or gather data in this world, who are doing it in order to harm people. When they register the character of your sewage, they're not doing it in order to harm you. But the problem is that the data can be used to harm you. And therefore, I think it's very important to avoid that kind of argument, that we're doing it for people's good, so we can drop a little privacy here and a little human rights here. Don't do that. It's poisoning the whole system, and it's actually undermining the license to operate for these kind of activities in the long run. So stick to the principles. Thanks.